In a dramatic turn of events within the federal workforce, key U.S. agencies have openly resisted a controversial directive from Elon Musk, who has taken a leading role in President Donald Trump's efforts to streamline government operations. Musk, as head of the newly established Department of Government Efficiency DOGE, mandated that federal employees report their accomplishments from the previous week, threatening termination for those who fail to comply. As tensions mount, multiple agencies including the FBI, State Department, and the Pentagon have instructed their staff to disregard Musk's request, leading to a chaotic environment marked by conflicting guidance and legal concerns. The situation escalated over the weekend when Musk's team sent out an email giving employees just 48 hours to outline 5 specific achievements. In a post on X, Musk emphasized the urgency of the request, asserting that many government workers were performing minimally and suggesting that fraudulent practices were occurring within the payroll system. The reason this matters is that a significant number of people who are supposed to be working for the government are doing so little work that they are not checking their email at all. Musk claimed, though he provided no evidence to support his assertions about widespread fraud. Pushback from federal officials was immediate and widespread. Many agency leaders expressed confusion, with some employees receiving contradictory instructions. For instance, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., head of the Department of Health and Human Services, initially urged compliance before later retracting that directive, leading to further uncertainty among the agency's approximately 80,000 employees. "I have received no assurances that there are appropriate protections in place to safeguard responses to this email," Sean Keaveney, the acting general counsel for the department, expressed in a candid email highlighting concerns over security and privacy. Criticism of Musk's ultimatum has come from both sides of the political aisle. Senator John Curtis, a Republican from Utah, called for a more compassionate approach, stating, "These are real people. These are real lives." Meanwhile, Democrats have denounced the directive as illegal, with Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland asserting the actions he's taking are illegal. The controversy has sparked discussions about the legality of Musk's authority and the implications for federal employment practices. The political landscape surrounding this issue is further complicated by Trump's support of Musk's initiatives. The president's encouragement for Musk to adopt a more aggressive stance on government reduction has drawn scrutiny, especially as thousands of federal employees are already facing layoffs or forced resignations. Everett Kelly, president of the American Federation of Government Employees, has called for the administration to rescind Musk's request and issue an apology, labeling Musk as unelected and unhinged. In a further shakeup, Trump has appointed Dan Bongino, a conservative commentator and staunch ally, as the deputy director of the FBI, a position typically held by someone with extensive law enforcement experience. Critics have raised concerns about the implications of having non-career officials leading critical agencies, particularly as Bongino has previously advanced controversial narratives about the FBI and the 2020 election. As the deadline for compliance looms, many federal workers are grappling with uncertainty about their future. The fallout from Musk's directive and the broader restructuring efforts led by the Trump administration could lead to significant shifts in the federal workforce, with potential long-term impacts on government operations and employee morale. With calls for legal challenges gaining traction, the unfolding saga raises questions about the balance of power in federal employment and the direction of government efficiency initiatives. As these developments continue to unfold, it remains to be seen how federal agencies will navigate the demands from the Trump administration and Musk's controversial approach. The responses from federal employees and unions will likely shape the future of government employment practices in the U.S., setting the stage for a heated debate on the role of efficiency and accountability within the public sector. In recent weeks, concerns about the state of press freedom in the United States have reached an alarming crescendo, primarily due to actions taken by the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, under the leadership of Brendan Carr, a Trump appointee, as Donald Trump resumes his political ambitions. Media experts warned that his administration's aggressive stance towards the press represents a true free speech emergency. The FCC has initiated investigations into several media organizations, including prominent entities like NPR, PBS, and Comcast, which owns NBC News. The investigations were announced shortly after Trump took office, signaling a potential shift in the relationship between the government and media. Carr expressed his concerns about what he described as invidious forms of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion within these organizations. In a letter to Comcast, he stated, "I am concerned that Comcast and NBC Universal may be promoting invidious forms of DEI in a manner that does not comply with FCC regulations. This rhetoric is alarming to many as it appears to establish a precedent for government-led scrutiny of media content deemed undesirable by the administration." Matthew Gertz, a senior fellow at the media watchdog group Media Matters, characterized these developments as a disturbing attack on both freedom of speech and freedom of the press. He stated, "What we're seeing is really an attack on freedom of speech and freedom of the press from all aspects of the Trump administration right now. The implications of such investigations could create a chilling effect as journalists may feel intimidated or threatened, fearing repercussions for their reporting." Critics have noted that the FCC's actions mirror tactics employed in other countries where governments exert control over media outlets. Rebecca Hamilton, a professor at American University Washington College of Law, highlighted that these investigations align with a broader effort to punish media outlets that Trump perceives as adversarial. Hamilton warned that such actions could significantly impair journalists' ability to report freely, fostering an environment of fear and self-censorship. While the FCC has focused its investigations on outlets that are traditionally viewed as critical of Trump, there remains a conspicuous absence of scrutiny directed towards more favorable media organizations such as Fox News. This selective targeting raises questions about the impartiality of the Commission and its commitment to upholding the principles of a free press. Craig Aaron, co-CEO of Free Press, emphasized that the FCC's actions represent an alarming trend, stating the First Amendment exists to stop the government from shutting down speech it doesn't like. A weaponized FCC is trying to do exactly that. As the landscape of media freedom in the U.S. evolves, the potential for future regulatory actions looms large. The very fabric of journalistic integrity is at stake, prompting concerns about the broader implications for democracy and public discourse. The coming months will be critical as Trump's administration continues to redefine its relationship with the media, potentially setting a dangerous precedent for how the government interacts with the press. Observers will be watching closely to see whether these investigations lead to further encroachments on press freedoms or provoke a countermovement to safeguard the rights enshrined in the First Amendment. In a dramatic turn of events, federal agencies are facing a chaotic backlash against Elon Musk's recent demands for accountability from federal employees. The billionaire, who is serving as a special advisor to President Donald Trump, has sparked controversy with an ultimatum requiring government workers to report their weekly accomplishments or face termination. This mandate has been met with fierce resistance from key departments, including the FBI, State Department, and Pentagon, highlighting the growing tensions within the Trump administration as it pursues aggressive cost-cutting measures. Musk's directive, issued via email over the weekend, instructed federal employees to list 5 specific achievements from the previous week, threatening job loss for those who failed to comply by the deadline. This unusual demand has left many in the federal workforce bewildered, as it seems to lack a clear legal basis. "I have received no assurances that there are appropriate protections in place to safeguard responses to this email," wrote Sean Keaveney, the acting general counsel at the Department of Health and Human Services. His concerns reflect broader fears among federal employees regarding potential repercussions for their responses and the confidentiality of their work. The administration's push for compliance is part of a broader strategy to reduce the size of the federal workforce, an initiative supported by Trump as he seeks to fulfill campaign promises made during his return to office. Amidst this backdrop, unions representing federal workers have threatened legal action, arguing that Musk's request is unlawful. The American Federation of Government Employees has called for the administration to rescind the order and apologize to federal employees, emphasizing the emotional toll these demands can take. Complicating matters further, there has been a lack of coherent communication among various agencies. Some departments like the FBI have instructed their employees to ignore Musk's request, while others, such as the Department of Defense, have advised staff to pause any responses. This inconsistency has led to confusion and frustration among workers who are already grappling with the implications of mass layoffs and firings that have characterized the Trump administration's recent actions. The fallout from Musk's ultimatum has not only ignited political tensions but has also caused significant anxiety among federal employees. Many, like Mike McCombs, a former disaster recovery coordinator for the Small Business Administration, have experienced the harsh realities of the administration's cost-cutting measures firsthand. McCombs, along with thousands of others, was abruptly terminated from his position, leaving him and his family in a precarious financial situation. His story underscores the human impact of these sweeping changes. As families struggle with uncertainty over health insurance and employment, critics from both sides of the political aisle have expressed their concerns regarding Musk's approach. Republican Senator John Curtis lamented the lack of compassion in Musk's ultimatum, urging for a more humane perspective on the implications of job cuts. Meanwhile, Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen has openly condemned the actions as illegal, adding to the chorus of disapproval surrounding this controversial directive. As the administration continues to grapple with internal discord and external criticism, the future of federal employment under these new policies remains uncertain. Musk has defended his actions by framing them as a necessary pulse check on government productivity, asserting that a significant number of federal workers are failing to fulfill their duties. However, the lack of empirical evidence to support claims of widespread inefficiency raises questions about the motivations behind such drastic measures. Moving forward, the confrontation between Musk's demands and the resistance from federal agencies may have far-reaching implications for the Trump administration's broader agenda. As the chaos unfolds, the potential for further upheaval within the federal workforce looms large, leaving many to wonder how these developments will shape the future of government operations and employee relations in the United States. The coming weeks will be critical in determining whether the administration can navigate this tumultuous period without further damaging the trust and morale of its federal employees. In a political landscape fraught with uncertainty and many observers are questioning whether President Trump's economic approach is designed to foster genuine prosperity for Americans or to consolidate his own power. Recent analyses draw unsettling parallels between Trump's tactics and those of historical figures known for their authoritarian control over both economy and governance. The Atlantic's Jonathan Chait paints a striking picture by likening Trump to Vladimir Putin, who famously asserted dominance over Russia's oligarchs 2 decades ago. In a meeting reminiscent of those Kremlin gatherings, Trump's loyalty enforcer Stephen Miller reportedly met with Meta's CEO Mark Zuckerberg at Mar-a-Lago, emphasizing that any partnership would have to align with Trump's political agenda. Chait highlights an ominous warning from Trump to Zuckerberg: if he does anything illegal during Trump's second term, he will spend the rest of his life in prison. Such statements resonate eerily with the coercive tactics of Putin, suggesting that compliance with Trump's vision is becoming a requisite for economic success. This climate of fear and compliance is compounded by a broader context where economic stability appears increasingly tethered to political loyalty. Analysts contend that Trump's economic policies may ultimately serve to strengthen his grip on power rather than address the pressing needs of an economically strained populace. Critics argue that these tactics are not only detrimental to the democratic fabric of the United States but also pose significant risks to long-term economic health. Amidst these economic and political maneuvers, a recent report from Reuters indicates that Trump's policies may inadvertently benefit the Russian economy, which has struggled under the weight of international sanctions following the invasion of Ukraine. The article suggests that Trump's approach could provide a lifeline to Russian oligarchs, further complicating the geopolitical landscape and raising ethical concerns about the implications of such economic entanglements. As the Biden administration continues to advocate for policies aimed at addressing inflation and fostering economic recovery, the contrast with Trump's tactics becomes more pronounced. The future of the economy remains uncertain as both sides grapple with the ramifications of political allegiance on economic well-being. Observers note that the efficacy of Trump's economic strategies will ultimately depend on whether they can deliver tangible benefits to the average American without compromising the foundations of democracy. Looking ahead, the intersection of economic policy and political loyalty will likely remain a contentious topic. The ongoing debate highlights the fragile balance between governance and economic prosperity, with the actions of political leaders having far-reaching implications. As the nation approaches another election cycle, it remains to be seen how these dynamics will unfold and what they will mean for the American economy in the years to come. In a striking turn of events, Donald Trump's administration appears to be pivoting towards a controversial approach in foreign policy, particularly regarding the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. This shift, which some experts describe as shameful, raises significant concerns about the United States' long-standing commitment to supporting democracy and sovereignty on the global stage. Corey Sheikh, a prominent foreign policy analyst and director of defense policy studies at the American Enterprise Institute, articulated these concerns during a recent discussion with columnist David French. At the heart of the matter is the Trump administration's reported willingness to negotiate a peace deal with Russia that could potentially undermine Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty. Sheikh bluntly stated no American president in the last 80 years and probably 100 years before that would have made this bargain. This sentiment echoes a broader unease among political analysts and advocates for democratic values who fear that such a shift could embolden authoritarian regimes worldwide. French highlighted Trump's past statements, illustrating a pattern of behavior that has raised eyebrows among allies. During the conversation, he referenced Trump's dismissive comments about Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, suggesting that Ukraine must act quickly to secure its sovereignty. The discussion then turned to the implications of Trump's warming relations with Putin, with Sheikh noting that the administration's refusal to recognize Russian aggression in a G7 communiqué signals a troubling trend towards accommodating Russian interests at the expense of Ukraine. As the war in Ukraine continues, its outcome is pivotal not only for the region but for global security. Sheikh emphasized that the conflict's implications extend far beyond Ukraine's borders. Putin believes there is no such thing as Ukraine. This war is a manifestation of his broader ambition to reassert Russian dominance over former Soviet territory, she explained. The stakes, therefore, are not merely about one nation's survival but about the integrity of international norms that promote freedom and democracy. Despite the grim realities on the ground, where Ukraine has sustained heavy casualties and is under immense pressure, there remains a resilient hope among its defenders. Sheikh reassured that Ukraine, with or without U.S. support, will continue to fight against Russian aggression. However, she warned that a withdrawal of American support would severely limit Ukraine's ability to defend itself effectively, particularly in terms of air defense capabilities and modern military equipment. The Trump administration's evolving stance has ignited a fervent debate within the Republican Party, revealing a rift between traditional conservative foreign policy principles and Trump's populist approach. Some GOP members have openly criticized the administration's overtures towards Russia, advocating for continued support for Ukraine. Yet, as Sheikh pointed out, the power dynamics within the party suggest that Trump's influence remains strong, complicating the prospects for a unified Republican stance on foreign policy. Looking ahead, the conversation concluded with Sheikh's prediction that Ukraine would continue to resist Russian occupation for the foreseeable future. "I think Ukraine will still be fighting to try to push Russia out of currently occupied territories," she stated, reinforcing the notion that the battle for Ukraine is emblematic of a larger struggle for democratic values in the face of authoritarianism. As the geopolitical landscape continues to shift, the implications of Trump's foreign policy decisions will likely reverberate beyond Ukraine, influencing America's role in global governance and international alliances. The coming months will be critical in determining not only the fate of Ukraine but also the United States' commitment to uphold democratic principles in an increasingly complex world. As the geopolitical landscape shifts dramatically, the upcoming meetings between President Donald Trump, French President Emmanuel Macron, and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer carry weighty implications for transatlantic relations and the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Scheduled to take place in Washington this week, these discussions come at a time when both European leaders must navigate an increasingly unpredictable and assertive Trump whose foreign policy has taken a sharp turn that could redefine alliances previously considered stable. In the backdrop of Trump's controversial remarks labeling Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky a dictator, Macron and Starmer face the challenge of addressing a U.S. administration that appears to be distancing itself from traditional European allies. Trump's recent overtures to Russian President Vladimir Putin, including discussions aimed at bypassing Europe to negotiate peace in Ukraine, have left many in Europe questioning the durability of the post-World War II security framework that has underpinned their stability for decades. Reflecting on the gravity of the situation, former Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull emphasized the necessity for European leaders to adopt a firmer stance. "This is the moment of truth," he stated. "They simply have to have the steel to stand up to Trump and tell him what they think, namely that siding with Putin against Ukraine is a devastating blow to America's prestige and standing in the world." This sentiment illustrates the rising anxiety among Western allies regarding Trump's approach to relations with Russia and Ukraine. Diplomats warn that Trump is not the same leader he was during his first term. Gérard Araud, a former French ambassador to the U.S., noted, "Now he thinks he knows everything, he's more radical on the substance, and he is surrounded by yes-men." This transformation complicates the task for Macron and Starmer, as they attempt to dissuade Trump from his erroneous narrative that U.S. support for Ukraine constitutes a betrayal. Macron has already signaled his intent to confront Trump directly, asserting, "You can't be weak against President Putin. It's not you, it's not your trademark, it's not in your interest." Adding to the complexity of the situation is the broader context of Trump's foreign policy, which has often favored unilateralism and economic self-interest over multilateral cooperation. The president's recent demands for access to Ukraine's rare earth minerals and proposals for territorial negotiations have raised alarms among European leaders who fear such maneuvers could undermine Ukraine's sovereignty. Starmer's strategy, while less publicly articulated, is expected to emphasize Britain's readiness to bolster its military support for Europe, particularly through troop contributions to a potential peacekeeping force in Ukraine. British officials anticipate that this commitment could resonate with Trump, who has shown appreciation for allies willing to shoulder more defense responsibilities. However, Starmer must tread carefully, ensuring that he does not inadvertently alienate European partners by overly accommodating Trump's demands. As the discussions unfold, the specter of Trump's relationship with Putin looms large. Analysts warn that Trump may push for a rapid ceasefire in Ukraine, potentially facilitating a peace deal that could favor Russian interests. This concern is compounded by fears that such a move might open the door to increased Russian influence in Ukrainian politics, threatening the democratic governance that Western leaders aim to protect. Interestingly, some experts suggest that Macron and Starmer might benefit from framing their arguments around broader geopolitical concerns, particularly regarding U.S.-China relations. By positioning the need for a strong stance against Putin as essential to maintaining credibility in dealings with Beijing, they could appeal to Trump's strategic interests. However, even this approach carries risks, given Trump's tendency to prioritize personal relationships over traditional diplomatic protocols. As Macron and Starmer prepare for their respective meetings with Trump, the stakes are higher than ever. The outcome of these discussions could reshape not only the future of U.S.-European relations but also the trajectory of the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. The increasing unpredictability of Trump's foreign policy raises pressing questions about the efficacy of traditional diplomatic strategies and the resilience of transatlantic alliances. Looking ahead, The European leaders must not only advocate for Ukraine's sovereignty but also work to preserve the principles of collective security that have defined the post-war order. As they navigate these high-stakes talks, the world watches closely, aware that the decisions made will have lasting implications for global stability. The evolving nature of U.S. foreign policy under Trump requires an agile diplomatic response from European leaders, challenging them to adapt to a new reality where the rules of engagement are rapidly changing.